We're at Pumpkin Hill. You ready?
Okay, so after my hour-long video on Sonic Generations, I needed a break from the Hedgehog. Just a little one, but a break nonetheless. So today I'm going to tackle something different and something a bit more low-key, smaller, and easier to digest. Don't worry, the next video after this will be a return to Sonic, but right now, let's give something else a try. So when I say Sega Dreamcast 3D platformers, pretty much the defining games that spring to mind are the Sonic Adventure games, but there was other stuff on the console as well. Hey, it's home to the best version of Rayman 2, as stated by the creator of Rayman himself. A lot of the smaller stuff just kinda got either overshadowed by the Sonic Adventure series or just forgotten entirely due to the Dreamcast commercial failure and very short lifespan. And one of these games is a little title called Kao The Kangaroo. Kao The Kangaroo was released on the 8th of December 2000 in Europe and the 20th of February 2001 in America for PC and Sega Dreamcast, right at the tail end of the console's lifespan. The game saw a pretty moderate success on both PC and Dreamcast, especially in Poland where the game's developer Tate Interactive are located, and it went on to spawn two sequels, Kao The Kangaroo Round 2, which released initially on PC exclusively in Poland in 2003 and was then released multi-platform on Xbox, GameCube, PS2 and again PC in America and Europe later down the line. And then the game got one final sequel, Kao Mystery of Volcano, in 2005, which released exclusively for Windows in Europe, Australia and Poland. Along with this, the original Kao game saw a GBA version and Kao got a PSP spin-off game called Kao Challenges in 2005 as well. So with all this, you would presume that the original Kao game was a great game. I mean, it managed to get two sequels along with a GBA port and a PSP spin-off. Well, in actuality, the game received very average review scores. It didn't exactly set the world on fire. The Dreamcast version of the game currently sits at 63 on Metacritic. So what gives? How can a game painfully average manage to spawn a little franchise? Was it just that in 2001 the game output on the Dreamcast was dwindling anyway, so the people still repping the console were just eager to try anything that came out? Well, let's find out. Let's give the game a try and see exactly what's up with it. Is this just a mediocre platformer that saw success due to people just playing what they could get at the tail end of the Dreamcast life, or is this a hidden gem that deserves to be picked up? Now this is going to be a very quick section. Story. This game's plot is very short and to the point. The game opens up with our main guy Kao chilling with his friends in a valley. He's running around having a great time and is then caught by a hunter who traps him in a cage. While sitting in the cage, Kao discovers a pair of boxing gloves just left there for whatever reason. And then level 1. Yeah, we really are not given much at all to go on. So I presume that Kao puts on the boxing gloves, breaks out of the cage and escapes, but I mean, I really am inferring. We literally just see Kao spot the boxing gloves. We aren't shown him escaping or even how he got to the first level, which seems to be a jungle theme. Maybe the manual will be more help. Here we go. After being kidnapped from his beautiful home, Kao must find his way back to Australia with your help. Unfortunately, there are more than a few people who want nothing more than to cause Kao total chaos, if not extinction, on the way. Okay, so that helps a bit. Maybe? Yeah, it's clear from the offset this game isn't really about the story. It's short and sweet, and to be fair, for this kind of game I like it. It just gets into things quickly rather than try and make some grand detailed plot when it doesn't need to. But I mean, I do think it is a bit too light. Like, we could have been shown Kao breaking out of the cage and running away to the first level. So Kao the Kangaroo's gameplay is quite similar to a certain Orange Bandicoot, and that's basically clear from the first level. So let's start off with the controls. So in terms of moveset, Kao keeps it pretty basic. Kao has a basic jump and 2 attacks. The first where he throws punches with his boxing gloves, and then the second being a tail whip, and that's it. So it's undeniable that this moveset is incredibly basic. Kinda like a certain Bandicoot. But I will say that Kao's movement feels really snappy and great. His jump as well feels almost unusually good. The game's movement and jump feels very good, to be honest, which you probably wouldn't think from just looking at the game. The jump feels a lot less static than the jump in a game like Crash Bandicoot, but to be fair, the original Crash came out in 1996 on the far technically inferior PlayStation 1. However, while Kao's move and jump feel really nice, I can't really say the same for his 2 attacks. The hit detection in this game is pretty shoddy. There will be times where Kao will knock out his enemies easily, but there are also times where it seems you are just going to take damage no matter what. You can come in at every fucking possible angle there is, you still just seem to take damage. It's put simply, bullshit. Another problem is the tail whip. You would assume that with a seemingly short range attack and a slightly longer range attack, you use the boxing gloves attack to take out the smaller standard enemies and use the tail whip to attack the bigger enemies with long range weapons like spears and stuff. But in actuality, it doesn't work. The tail whip hit detection just seems to be far worse than the boxing gloves attack. You need to be really specific with your angle and timing to get it to work, and usually it's just not worth the effort, so I find myself basically exclusively using the boxing gloves attack, as it just has a much better success rate from my experience. Now don't get me wrong as well, that's not saying that the boxing gloves attack is perfect, it's far from it. It too suffers from shoddy hit detection and very specific timing and angles. It just seems to work a fair bit better than the other attack. It's a shame really the combat feels quite static and unpolished, as it kinda clashes with KO's excellent movement and jump controls. But hey, it's not awful, it's just pretty stiff feeling and can be frustrating occasionally. What really mitigates the frustration is KO's health. Unlike Crash Bandicoot where you die after one hit without the use of power-ups, KO has a health bar and can take quite a few hits before dying. This really does mitigate the issue of the shoddy hit detection from the enemies, because I'm telling you now, if KO went with Crash's idea of one hit death, this game would really suffer, because for me, it seems any encounter with an enemy, there is always a chance to just lose health, even if it isn't really your fault. To really rub salt into wounds as well, KO's enemies respawn, and pretty quickly, so even if you do manage to take out an enemy unscathed, stay in that area for too long and he'll pop back in and attack you. I fucking hate infinitely respawning enemies in games, and this game is definitely one that could have gone without it. You can also center the camera behind KO by pressing the L trigger, and can then also sidestep, but it is completely useless, and I never used it once in the game, so I'm not really sure why they bothered implementing the sidestep in the first place. There's also a few power-ups KO can grab to aid him. There are these power gloves KO can collect that allow him to shoot a boxing glove at his enemies from a distance. These are great, but not really because they're satisfying or particularly fun, but more because it takes out the enemies easily and stops you having to deal with the shoddy hit detection. To be fair, I won't be overly mean, they're a pretty decent power-up, there's nothing especially wrong with them, it's just that I always seem to look out for them more out of wanting to avoid losing health from finicky combat encounters than actually finding it fun to execute. Another power-up is the wind icon. This allows KO to sprint, but for a brief period of time. These are a pretty cool power-up. I never really mentioned it before when talking about KO's movement, but he is quite slow. This is quite a slow-paced platformer, so this power-up adds a bit more speed to the gameplay and it's just quite fun to use. He also has a really strange sound effect for when you pick it up. What? The third power-up is an ice power-up that freezes all enemies for 8 seconds. This would be extremely useful, but I'm pretty sure I saw it like 2 times in the whole game, so I never really made much use of it. And the last power-up is this question mark that, from what I can tell, randomly either gives KO the speed up power-up or knocks down his health. It's alright, it doesn't really give off this huge sense of risk versus reward, since KO always seems to have enough health in the game, so I always just risked it and went for them anyway, but it's still a pretty fun power-up. Kao the Kangaroo is one of those linear corridor 3D platformers, exactly like Crash Bandicoot, although I will say that the levels are a bit less tight than Crash Bandicoot and do open up a bit more in certain stages, like this one with the floating islands or the ship level. On a whole though, it's still a very linear game, and to be honest, for the most part the levels are quite fun. The level design isn't going to win any awards, but it's pretty solid for the most part, and mixed with KO's snappy jump and responsive movement, it makes for a very pleasurable experience. Just classic tight platformer fun. In total there are 30 levels within the game, not a whole lot, and the game can be finished in around 1 to 2 hours, but for the most part these levels are quite well designed. However, I will say there are some notable stinkers in here that do bring the game down a bit, notably the 2 maze levels. The first one in this cave setting is just not fun to play at all. It's complete trial and error. It's an annoying maze with no direction on how to get out, so you literally do just have to wander around until you find the exit. It's one of the longer levels as well. This maze isn't small, there's lots of places to get lost. On top of that, the maze is littered with enemies that patrol the tight corridors, making for a very frustrating level, as constantly having to deal with the shoddy hit detection on top of the disorientating maze is just not a fun level at all. The sad thing is, you think that the level is a one-off, but then right near the end of the game you're thrown into another maze level, this time in the grasslands. There's slightly less enemies and it's slightly wider, so they're easier to avoid, but this maze is even bigger and even more difficult to navigate. It's just pure trial and error, and it isn't fun at all. Both of the mazes have sections that take you off on a complete tangent and lead to absolutely nothing. In In fact, some of the normal levels do this. There are occasionally small detours from the main path that you assume will take you to a power up or something, but they just lead to nothing. Like, what happened here? Did the developers just forget to place the items or something? This is probably a good time to talk about the checkpoint system in KO. It is strange. So instead of a traditional checkpoint system where KO will hit a certain point in the level and then if he dies will respawn there, you instead find these flags scattered around the levels you can collect. You're also given one for each level you start. These are your checkpoints, and the idea is you place your own checkpoints. The problem is KO's levels can vary from like 2 minutes to upwards of like 8 or 9 minutes, and I'm not even including the fucking mazes. So unless you're replaying the levels and know them off by heart, it's very hard to judge how far you are in the level and whether it's worth putting a checkpoint down. There's also times where I have just forgotten to put one down, die, and I'm sent back to the very beginning of a level, which is extremely frustrating. Other games have done this make your own checkpoint thing before, and I've never been a fan of it. Personally, I just think it's better if the developer places down the checkpoints. Like, you made the level and you know the length of it and where the difficult sections of it are, so you fucking tell me where the checkpoint should go. Well, hey, that's just me. The other issue with the checkpoint system is the game just doesn't tell you about it. In fact, the game doesn't really tell you much at all. It basically just assumes you will read the manual. The game never tells you about the different power-ups and what they do. It just throws you in the level and expects you to just figure it out, which, yeah, for the most part is fine, as it's really not complicated, but I think things like the checkpoint system really should have been explained. So when you collect the checkpoint flags, how do you think you put them down? No, honestly, go ahead and have a guess. Take a minute to look at this Dreamcast controller and tell me what button you think you press to place the checkpoints. You hold down the left trigger and press X. How would anyone fucking guess that without reading the manual? Come on guys, I mean, it can't have been a hard thing to explain in game, like seriously. The levels are also scattered with coins, health pickups and lives for KO. The coins you collect give you an extra life if you collect 50 of them, so there is an incentive there to nab them up. You obviously can also earn lives from finding extra lives within the level, and you can also replenish your health with the hearts scattered in the levels as well. I will say the placement of the lives and hearts is always quite good. The hearts always seem to be there when I need them, typically after a combat encounter, almost like the devs knew that I'd end up losing health from the shoddy hit detection. The lives are always in clear places, but also places that require you to take a bit more of a risk to grab them usually. KO also takes a stab at those infamous crash levels where you run towards the screen away from an oncoming obstacle, and they're pretty good, or at least they would be, except the guys at Tate made a very strange design decision. So for these types of levels, I'm sure you would assume that you would pull the stick back towards the screen like this, but in KO the controls are inverted, so you push the stick forwards and away and turn right to go left and left to go right. Why did anyone do this? It makes absolutely no sense. Like, you're clearly copying from Crash, which got those types of levels so right in the first place. All you needed to do was copy them really. Why change the controls to a worse setup? Did someone really playtest these levels and agree this is an improved way to play these stages? It kind of ruins the levels really, as they just seem to be disorientating now. Luckily there's really not many, and the actual level design isn't particularly hard, so you can get by them reasonably stress free. There are some standout levels in KO though that I do really like. I quite like the ice levels, the platforming is tight and precise and it provides a good challenge. The jungle levels are quite fun, and the slide levels that take quite a clear inspiration from Mario 64 are always fun as well. I do think it's time to talk about the theming of these levels. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. I mean, it's a bit on the generic side, but it's not bad. It's pretty nice and the levels are fun to run through. It's just, it doesn't really make sense, like, at all. Now, I'm not asking for an overriding level of consistency in a Kao Kangaroo linear Dreamcast platformer game, but I mean, like, it really doesn't make any sense at all. So we're meant to get back to the hunter, as it states in the manual. So we start off in the jungle, head to an ice world, then cave levels, then a one-off Egypt world, then some tropical island worlds, then an ancient Greek level, and then space. Yep, KO goes to space for a bit, cause why not? Then back to the jungle theme, and then a grasslands theme. I mean, let's be real, this game isn't really about a big sense of consistency, world building and story, so it doesn't really matter, it just seems a bit random. Hey, at least it makes for a diverse range of levels and things stay fresh. Shit, yeah, I forgot to talk about the bonus levels. Throughout some of the levels there will be warp pads to bonus levels that give you a chance to nab up some coins and lives. They're okay, they're nowhere near as well made compared to the Crash games, but the bonus levels in Crash are a lot more integral due to the game's steep difficulty. KO is a fair bit easier, so sometimes I just skip them entirely. There's also a few boss fights in this game. Excluding the final boss with the hunter, there's 4, one for each Theme. They're incredibly easy but really harmless. They all revolve around the idea of stunning the opponent and then hitting him with a standard attack. Do it 3 times and you win. They're super easy and can be completed in like 2 minutes. The designs of the bosses are again quite a bit random, like a bear wearing denim, a sailor with a hook for a hand, and a Greek god. Jesus, this game is random. The progression in KO is very simple and linear as well. There's no hub world or anything like that, just a simple level select screen that shows you all 30 levels you need to get through from the offset, so you can see how close you are to getting to the hunter, which is something I actually like. Another thing KO takes a stab at is vehicle stages. There's things like snowboards, hang gliders and hovercrafts. These stages are actually quite hard, as KO's health bar is gone and replaced with a one-hit death scenario, where you basically touch anything on the track and you're instantly dead. But the controls of these vehicles are incredibly tight and they feel good to control, so for the most part the levels get away with it and put up a good challenge, but never get too frustrating. I honestly think the vehicles here control way better than any of the vehicles from the first 3 Crash games. Although I will say, this fucking jet ski level here, is there any fucking need to add flags to the ramps and then have the player instantly die if they touch them? Like, seriously, what the fuck is that about? It's an absolute piss take. One last thing I do want to give to Kao The Kangaroo's gameplay is it has a very nice difficulty curve. The game starts off pretty easy, but it consistently gets harder until on the last few levels things can be surprisingly tense, and the level design stays pretty consistently fun throughout in my opinion, only dropping the ball on a few levels. Occasionally the game will have jumps that are just a tad too tight for my liking, but on a whole the levels are fun to run through. They're not groundbreaking and redefining the genre or anything, but the nice theming, fun platforming challenges, and KO's slow but snappy movements makes for a surprisingly relaxing experience that's good for some mindless platforming fun. Now there's no beating around the bush here, Kao The Kangaroo's graphics are rough. Definitely not incredible graphics as the North American box art exclaims. This game really only looks slightly better than an N64 game, and for 2001 it really was quite weak graphically. For comparison, here's some other Dreamcast games released in that same year: Crazy Taxi 2, Sonic Adventure 2, Shenmue 2, Virtua Tennis 2, Outrigger, Ooga Booga, and NBA 2K2. Yeah, the game graphically is not impressive, there's no real way around it. Don't get me wrong, graphics aren't the most important thing, and games with poor graphics can still be really fun, but I'm just showing you the other Dreamcast games released that year just to show you how the game does kind of stick out as a notable downgrade. Textures are low res and blocky, environments have simple geometry, and the enemies are pretty low poly to be honest. Kao himself isn't awful, he's modelled pretty decently, and I am a sucker for his design. I mean, look at this guy, he's adorable, but the game doesn't break any boundaries. Now the weak graphics could maybe be excused, as the game likely had a small budget and it was made by a pretty small team, but for me what really stings is this game should 110% be running at a locked 60 FPS on Dreamcast looking the way it is. The console can definitely handle it, but the game targets 30 FPS, and even then the game frequently dips when levels open up or the camera pans out or something. There's no excuse for how choppy this game can get. Like seriously, the Dreamcast should be running this in 60 FPS, it's just a case of really poor optimization. The frame rate never got so bad it hindered the gameplay, but it's just annoying, as if they're gonna skimp out on the graphics they could at least have had the game well optimized. Maybe the PC release ran better, I don't know. The music is a bit of a strange one as well, so for me it's very mixed. It's like some of the tracks are super generic and forgettable, like quite a few of them to be honest. For example, the ice theme just sounds bland and like stock music. The boss music as well just sounds generic and isn't great at all, but in my opinion there's also some really great level themes here, like really great in my opinion. They perfectly capture the theme of the level and the overall vibe of the game. They really stand out against the generic stock sounding tracks. Here's a couple of level themes I think are really good. also another problem with the music in game, which to be fair isn't a huge criticism, but it's still distracting. So all the level themes are around 1 minute 10 seconds in length, which is pretty short, but it's fine really. The issue is the devs couldn't be asked to loop the song seamlessly, so midway through the level the song will just fade out and then start again. It just comes off as lazy and unpolished. I mean, I get the dev team was small and this is a small game, but it's not a hard thing to do. I literally did it myself for the background music in this video. It's not a big issue, but it is odd when it happens. Here, look. So music, I'm kinda stuck on what to say. Being honest, probably about 70% of the game's tracks are generic and bland, but that 30% of tracks is like really good in my opinion. Overall though, I guess it's a pretty mixed bag. So let's talk about the ending of the game here. I really was debating even giving this game a separate ending section since the story is so basic, but I mean I'll talk about the final boss fight's gameplay mainly so it's not a complete loss. But this will be a short section for sure. So basically you unlock the last level, the fight with the hunter. It basically takes place in this jungle area with a cage in the middle. Patrolling around the cage is the hunter with his rifle. Basically, you need to dodge the hunter's shots and then when he's reloaded his gun, go in and hit him. When you hit him, you'll knock him back closer to the cage. Keep knocking him back until you push him under the trap and the cage falls on him and captures him. It's pretty simple. Now I will say that the fight isn't overly easy like the other bosses. It's still pretty easy, but there is some challenge there. The projectiles being fired from the gun are large and he fires them quickly, so if you don't keep moving he will hit you. You could also theoretically hide behind the trees, but I was just having too much trouble with the camera to do that. Kao the Kangaroo gives virtually no camera controls to the player at all, and usually with the corridor like level design it doesn't cause any issues, but the final boss fight is the only time that I really started to have an issue with it. It didn't stay focused on the hunter and I just couldn't see where he was a lot of the time, so had to move around in an attempt to move the camera, but while I'm doing that I'd end up getting shot. A bit frustrating, but it's not a huge issue. The fight is still pretty easy. So after capturing the hunter, all Kao's buddies come out and they all carry the hunter to the beach where they make him leave the island. The defeated hunter gets in a rowboat and rows away, and that's it. No credits or anything, the game just boots straight back to the main menu. Kao the Kangaroo is not a great game. I would be lying if I said it was. I would say it's a decently fun little game, but it's by no means breaking any ground. The level design for the most part is fun, but it's not like the cream of the platformer crop. It's just pretty fun, and with that said, there are levels like the 2 maze levels that feel like they were coded in the depths of hell. The jumping and movement feel tight and responsive, but the hit detection for the combat can be painfully bad at times. The vehicle sections are fun and have tight controls, but the game has graphics that are only slightly better than an N64 game, and in 2001 it looked dated the day it released. The theming of the levels is quite nice but a bit generic and often just random. The music has a few really notable tracks that are really great, but it is also full of generic forgettable tracks. The checkpoint system doesn't really work that well and is definitely inferior to a traditional checkpoint system, and there's just some strange design choices, like flipping the controls for the sections where Kao has to run towards the screen. The game is very short and on a whole just lacks a level of polish, but you know what? I had fun with it. It didn't blow me away, but I can think of much worse ways to spend a couple of hours, and there's something about this game that just gives it charm. Kao has a really cute design and the game just has character, like the strange sound you get for the speed up power up, or how when you go in the water Kao's neck just stretches so his head stays above the surface. Like, what is this? Why did they put this in? Who knows, but it's fucking funny. As I played through the game, I did develop a bit of a soft spot for it. Even though the game does have a fair few issues, you can tell it didn't have a big budget at all, and it was just a small team giving it their best shot. Even things like the manual are just really cute. You can tell this wasn't a big production. I mean, look at this here. In the bosses section of the manual, they forgot to rig the last 2 bosses to a proper stance, and they're just left there in their T-pose. This is something Nitro Rad brought up in his own video on the game, and I had to see it for myself, and yep, sure enough, there they are in all their T-pose glory. But again, it's stuff like that that made me just gain a bit of a soft spot for the game. It's strange because in the most obvious and typical ways, the game is a very generic platformer, but from the little things like this, it just has character. So to answer my initial question, is Kao the Kangaroo worth playing? Maybe? I don't know, it's really hard to say. It definitely won't blow you away, and it's not something you need to pick up, but if you're a fan of 3D platformers, especially Crash and early 2000s cute game mascots, I think you could do a lot worse. It's a fun little game and it does have character, just don't go in expecting a magnum opus. If you want the game, the Dreamcast version is an option, but it was also very recently ported to modern PCs and is available on the game distribution site GOG.com, which is like a lesser known Steam. The game is available in the Kao trilogy, which is all 3 of the main games for $4.99 here in the UK, a pretty good deal considering you get 3 games. Speaking of sequels, I have grown a bit of a fondness for Kao while making this video, so who knows, in the near future I might tackle Kao 2. Or I might just make Sonic videos as that's the only thing people want.